conference with the Farm Foundation and Farm Credit, Training for Success, Resources and Tools for Working with Beginning Farmers and Ranchers. I'm Gary Madison. I work for Farm Credit in Washington, D.C., and I'll be your guide through the rest of today. We're going to have another poll. Let's, wait a minute, before we get to that, there's some important notes. If you weren't with us yesterday, on your website that you have gone to, the Event Hub is where you're going to find everything. So go to Event Hub and then click on the agenda. You'll find on the agenda each session individually. You have to join each session across the day today individually. So when this one ends, if you want to go to networking, you have to click a button to get into that. You'll see a Q&A tab underneath the video that's running of we presenters. That's where you can ask questions of the presenters. The presenters will be able to see those questions. And right next to that Q&A is a tab that says polls, so you can click on that to answer the poll. Right after this session, again, go back to that agenda and click on the networking, or there's a little button underneath. Look at it. I think there's a little button underneath that says go to the networking. We'd like to see you in the networking. Our speakers will join us there also. And right now you're seeing a poll that's up there. How helpful are farm business financial performance benchmarks to beginning farmers? What do you think? You can rate that anywhere from 1 to 5 stars. And if you're posting on social media, please use hashtag BFR1220. All right. Well, we'll let a few of you get onto this poll and see what we've got. All right, a few people are answering the poll. Let me let that run for a while. See if you can find that polls tab underneath the video that is the slide. You'll see the important notes slide. If you scroll down, then you'll be able to see the poll. With us, our purpose today here is to provide to provide you as the audience with some lenders or consultants and some beginning farmers who have achieved a measure of success with the getting through all of the barriers of a farm startup, and their loan officers or consultants have helped them through that process. And we'll have different perspectives. How did the loan officer see it? How did the beginning farmer see it? And also in this, our moderator will be talking a little bit about the one-page annual cash flow budget tool to demonstrate the uses of a very simple benchmark. So we're going to try to bring that topic into this discussion also. So our moderator today is Erin Pirro of Farm Credit East. She is a certified agricultural consultant and leads Farm Credit East's agricultural retail benchmarks program. Allison Paap is vice president and lending manager at American AgCredit in Temecula, California. Harrison Bardwell runs Bardwell Farm in Hatfield, Massachusetts. And Jess Koehler is the owner and operator with her husband of La Finquita Winery in Ramona, California. And I'd ask Jess to go ahead and start her slides and tell us about her operation. Thanks, Jess.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. So I own and operate La Finquita Winery and Vineyard with my husband. You can go ahead and hit the next slide. So a little bit of background, really our true love for wine and the Ramona Valley began on our 6-month date in October of 2008. We went up to Apple Days in Julian, which is a nearby mountain town. We had planned to do the apple picking thing and go wine tasting, but what we didn't take into consideration was that it was a weekend during Apple Days and everybody was there. You could not walk into the tasting rooms. So we ended up stopping in Ramona, fell in love with it, spent like 3 or 4 hours doing a private tour, private tasting with the owners over at Schwazdale Winery, and just fell in love with it. We ended up starting to work for them. And we knew we wanted our own place. It just happened a good 15, 20 years sooner than we had ever anticipated it. So yeah, that happened in 2013, and here we are in 2020, still going strong. You can go to the next slide. So our tagline is a modern romance of wine, and that's really because wine has had so much of a presence in our relationship and has really been a part of our story. And together we share a passion for the rich history and tradition of wine and believe that it is integral to the romance of wine. We're the youngest winery owners and winemakers in the Ramona Valley AVA, and among the youngest, if not the youngest, in San Diego, at least first generation that we know of. We also both come from a tech background. My husband's real job is also still in technology. So we kind of weave those together, and that's where we got our modern romance of wine. Next slide. So we have a beautiful 8-acre property. It was named La Finquita back in the 80s when it was originally developed, and it means the little farm. The gentleman who developed it developed a lot of the land that's out the window to my side here, a lot of the homes out there, and he wanted his property to, his little farm, to overlook what he had done. So we have Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Verdot, and Syrah here on our property, and then we work with another handful of local vineyards to supplement our fruit, and we'll have some more vineyards being planted hopefully in this coming spring. Next slide. The heart and soul really is our tasting room and our winery team. Our team is amazing. If you don't get me or my husband in the tasting room, you get one of our best friends who are just as passionate about this as we are. So it's a really fun experience. You always feel like a part of the family, whether it's your first visit or your 50th visit. It's a lot of fun. We've got a few pictures of our team up there on the slide deck. Not during a pandemic, we do pictures with Santa in the wine cave, where one of our team members dresses up as Santa during December. So hopefully we'll get to do that again next year. Next slide. And then this, just a couple pictures in there. And then the final slide, we're very honored to be nominated #1 best tasting room in Ramona and #2 best wine in Ramona this year as part of the Reader's Poll. So that was kind of fun to include.
Harrison, please take us through your slides.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Cool. My name's Harrison Bardwell. I'm owner of Bardwell Farm in Hatfield, Massachusetts. You can go to the next slide if you'd like. So we're a 20-acre diversified vegetable farm settled in the Pioneer Valley of Hatfield, Mass. We're right next to the Connecticut River. We own, I believe, the world's 3rd best soil. So that's a pretty cool thing to kind of have on my shoulder. I started farming about full-time farming about 5 or 6 years ago. I've been doing this since I was about 12 or 13. And how I got into it is the farm's actually been in our family since 1685. And I always like to pronounce that because we're over a 336 or 38-year farm with a new generation now in place. So I started back when I was about 12 or 13, getting involved in agriculture with my grandparents who had been farming the land previous of mine, growing more wholesale crops of tobacco and field corn, etc. I've always been that outdoor kid who didn't like sitting inside, always wanted to kind of play in nature and figure things out outdoors. And growing in their half-acre vegetable garden really was something that spoke to me and I was interested in. So working with them for a couple of years, we were growing enough food that was plenty for our family and too much for our family. So I had this brilliant idea of let's put a farm stand let's put a farm stand out front of the house and see if we can sell some of the crops. You can go to the next. Oh, before you do this, sorry, that previous picture. This is just an overlook of the back of our farm. There's some greenhouses here and some of the acreage that we farm. You can go to the next slide. So since 2016, almost 15, we started a small farm stand, and year after year, we slowly worked up to our business at that point. Previous years, I was really kind of more part-time on the farm, working with other farmers in the area, working on other farms, going to school in agriculture. 2019 was really the first year we could show what we have to offer. And that was the first year farm store versus a farm stand on the farm. Many years leading up to getting to this success point, which was really cool. And I can't thank enough the people that helped me get here to be able to display, whether it was the growing, the marketing, the website we had created, and along with all the growing practices of growing over 100 varieties of vegetables at this point. So the picture you're looking at right now was last year, was a mini farm store / stand setup that we had. If you go to the next slide. In 2020, so this year, we really jumped the gun and expanded our retail business, where we invested in an over $5,000 commercial tent to transition. I wish I put in here our little farm stand cart we had in the past. You can go to the next slide, if you will, to the big farm stand that we're calling really Bardwell Farm Store for 2020 season. And what this did is it really opened up our capacity of being able to sell and advertise and promote a young farm business in Hatfield that a lot of people just weren't used to. This was the first year we decided to go manned, where we had registers and employees to sell and promote and advertise our product. This year was the first year we were really able to advertise and promote the value-added products, the meat products, the other things that we were selling along with our vegetables to make us a viable business. So there's a lot of new this year with, one, the growing side of things, and two, our business side of things. But we kind of took it upon ourselves. We were this small farm stand that had a lot of interest and a lot of town's interest around and the community. But we wanted to take it that next step to offer more. So this is the front of what our stand looked like sometime in late September this year, with a nice sign in the front in the big tent. You can go to the next slide. These are a couple of the products that we offer, and it's kind of hard to get a full display of what our retail stand looked like this year, but I think I counted sometime in September, and we had over 200 products under this tent at one given point. So we are really catering to a diverse crowd of people to offer a diverse variety of vegetables and products. And what our main goal is to kind of act like a mini store. So if people are coming to get their sweet corn, we had eggs to offer, we had cheese to offer, we had hamburger patties to offer, along with salsa that they might want to bring home and put with their chips. So all these local products, whether they were grown in our backyard from Bardwell Farm, whether they were fruits from the local orchards, whether they were local businesses, small businesses that made other value-added products, our main goal was to offer as much as we could to our customers to give them kind of that one-stop shop. You can continue. So on the other side of things, the retail business is definitely something that I've loved and I've been doing for years. But my real passion is the agriculture and growing the food for the local community that I have. So these are just a couple pictures. Up on the left is the spinach we were harvesting all fall that we fresh packed into wholesale outlets all fall. The picture, the upper right, is me on the tractor with a planter I got through a grant a couple years ago, planting, I believe that was carrots or beets. And then the bottom picture is some of the amazing field tomato hauls we had this past season. My passion is playing in the soil, being in the dirt, being outside all day long. Is where I really love to be. And this year, with the transition to creating that farm store / farm stand, I really started to rely on people to be able to promote this side of my business as well as the face of our business. So being involved in both was really a lot this year, but being fortunate to have great people behind my back to be able to advertise and promote the over 200, maybe even 300 products we had at one point was really gratifying to have. You can go to the next slide. That was it. So yeah, we're a small diversified vegetable farm that are trying to cater to as many people as we can. So thank you.
All right, just waiting for the right slides to show up. I've got a little bit of a lag here, but let's go ahead and get started. My name is Erin Pirro, and I'm a farm business consultant in New England, the northeastern part of the country. And what I do with clients is help them understand the story their numbers are telling them in their business. And we use a lot of tools to do that. And one of those is the 5-line income statement. So go ahead, Morgan, and you can start the slides going. Maybe I have a little bit of a lag here, but the first one that we wanted to share with you is the 5-line income statement. And the basic premise of this is that if we can understand how our expenses are organized within the business, we can understand whether our business is really good at turning raw materials into sales dollars, or if that's an area that we could use to improve our efficiency. And we do this by separating our expenses into those that are paid no matter what, no matter how much business we do that year. And things like that are insurance or interest or the property taxes, right? None of those vendors care how much business you do. You still are required to pay on a general level those expenses no matter what. But then we think about things, especially in agriculture, like our crop inputs, like our labor, right? Like our packaging. Those are all going to vary with the amount of business that we do. And if we can separate those expenses into those two categories, we can get a good handle on the efficiency of the business. And the reason we want to do this is the more we get out of every sales dollar after we pay for what it took to create that sales dollar, the easier time we have of covering overhead and putting some money towards profit. And when we do that for a bunch of businesses and then can compare across the industry, we get what's called a benchmark. And a benchmark is nothing more than an industry standard, but it's an important one because it's a tool to let us know what's possible. And if I know in this example that my sales tend to be about $130,000, or they were for the past year, and 80,000 of that was put towards the crop inputs and the packaging and the other variable expenses of production and selling, then I know that I have 54,000 left over, or 40% of my sales. So that says every dollar of growth that I get now is going to leave me 40 cents because I have to pay for that product and selling it. But that 40 cents goes towards my overhead and profit. And what's so important about that is every time I grow and get 40 cents, right, that's very efficient compared to if I had a low gross margin where I only got to keep 20 cents. I have to do twice as much work, have twice as many inputs, take twice as much risk in order to be able to earn the same amount to cover overhead and profit. So if we can use our business records to understand what that margin is and then compare against the industry to know what's possible, we can make good decisions to help us be more efficient with where we put our time and our money and the different products that we spend. And once we know what those goals are, we can take that and use it on the budget that we're preparing, which is nothing more than a plan for the next time period, but a plan in numbers. And if we run through all the numbers of what we expect things to look like, I know this much is how much I need to pay for my utility bill. I know this is what my insurance is going to be throughout the year. I can then see what my end results are projecting. And if I'm going to have a low margin overall, I can ask some questions. Why is that? And then do something about it before the year is over, right? In fact, before the year even starts, because this is my plan and I can tweak it before we even start. Unfortunately, though, so many of us start a business because we're good at what we do and we love doing what we do and we want it to be our own boss. And then we realize there's a whole lot of other stuff that comes along with being in business. And if we can harness this and we can put it to work for us, it's going to be more profitable than any tractor you ever buy. And I know them's fighting words, but hear me out and listen to our farmers today, because you're going to hear exactly why it makes sense. All right, next slide. The idea when we get to a cash flow budget is simply laying out what income we expect to have in that particular month or week or whatever time period we're working with, and then what outlays of cash we expect to have at the same time period so that we can match them up. And in agriculture, a very seasonal business, we will often see them be mismatched. When we lay it out on paper, we can see what that mismatch is and then use that information to plan for how we get through that year. So if you know that you spend more in January than you tend to bring in, you can make arrangements to use your savings. You could get a line of credit. You could use your credit cards. Perhaps you pre-sell some of your product in order to raise that cash to be able to pay January's bills. And whatever you see bringing in January and then spending in January, that's the balance that then starts February. And you run through this same cycle as you're planning all through the year to know where you're going to end up. And if you know that you're going to end up at the end of December with not very much money on hand, looking at it before January starts is a really, really good place to be, so you can make whatever adjustments are necessary. Should you increase prices? Should you change your product mix or your crop mix? Can you buy inputs differently or better? Are you buying too many, meaning buying in bulk, trying to save on each individual unit, but tying up a lot of cash simply because you're trying to get a better price on each individual one? Right? There are risks with that, and there's a good reason to do it, but we need to understand where all that cash is going so that we can make it through the whole year. All right, let's keep on going. Gary, I see your chat, and I don't know why, but the slides aren't showing up for me. It's just everybody here, and I've been playing with the different settings. So apologize for the technical difficulty trying to keep up with the Zoom as it's lagging as well. So we can just keep going on these annual cash flows. The idea is that if you start with a whole year for the plan and then break it down a little bit farther, you'll be able to see individually what's happening in the different months. And as I said, seasonally, we have some very different patterns in agriculture, and it's going to be different from one coast to the next. And by doing this individually for your own operation and then comparing it to what you see possible across the industry, especially in your own region, you can get a good idea of what opportunities you can take advantage of and figure out how can we do this just a little bit better so that I get paid for all of the input I put in to the work that I'm doing. This is just a quick example of what that looks like annually. And there is a resource called the cash flow spreadsheet on the Farm Start website for Farm Credit East. This is something that we recommend to any of our beginning farmers start to look at. If you have a tool like QuickBooks that allows you to do this and budget inside the program, that's always a great recommendation, because then you can compare against your budget with your actual records as you are using them. However, if you don't have access to that yet, here's a great place to start with a simple spreadsheet in Excel. And it's going to tell you where are those holes during the course of the year that you want to fill in, and give you the opportunity to figure out, hey, these are the months that really are flush. So those are the ones where I want to start saving for that rainy day or whatever investment I may be looking forward to in my business. Okay, why don't I turn that back to Gary and he can talk over where those resources are located.
All right, thanks, Erin. So I put it in the chat box for you can also see so you can copy out of the chat box or write it down from here, farmbiztrainer.com, and then resources and one-page planning suite. On this site are some downloadable spreadsheets. There also are slideshows like what Erin just showed us some slides from. And I encourage you to use those if you're a beginning farmer trainer. Swipe all that stuff off of that website and go ahead and use it. There are several other spreadsheets for different farm businesses that we have also been developed that have not yet been posted on that website. If you want to talk more about it, just shoot me an email. Thanks, Erin. Uh-oh, did we lose Erin? There she is.
I'm here, so I think some slides, right? Okay, Allison, I thought you had some slides that you were going with next. Okay.
Yeah, no. So if we want to move into maybe a little bit more question and answer, the slides that I had were really just reiterating the information that Erin went over about the 5-line income statement and how that translates into a monthly cash flow.
Awesome. So processes that are used with everybody. So
Exactly.
let's move on then some of those questions for our panelists. So Harrison, you talked a lot about liking to be outside and out in the field and getting your hands dirty, but you pay attention to your numbers a lot more than the average farmer. What point or what was the deciding factor that changed your viewpoint from farmer to farm business person?
Well, when I started my business, I really didn't have a lot of business background on numbers and how they worked and how they really influenced any type of business. And so the first couple of years, it was simple. We weren't bringing in a lot of money, and the expenses weren't as crazy. The numbers weren't as crazy. It was simple. You could put it on a simple spreadsheet and kind of and lay them out and see what you were looking at. As I grew and grew, and when I say I grew faster, and I'm still growing faster than I probably should be. So there's a lot more numbers and different things to be looking at. And as soon as that started happening, I was more triggering myself of like, whoa, I don't know exactly what I'm looking at. There's a lot of different inputs coming in, a lot of different sales channels starting to happen. And it was really a tipping point of like, I didn't feel like I had full control of the business side of things, and I wasn't aware of where money was going, how it was tracking, where it was coming in and where it was going out as best as I should have. And I guess deep down in myself, I've always been a money type of person of, I like to know how much I'm spending. I like to know how much is going out, and I like to know where. And that really was my tipping point of like, I need to get on track and start educating myself on what these numbers mean and where they should be going, what they should be looking at. And I started with a simple QuickBooks system, which I will to this day thank myself for doing, along with the people that helped me get there. So, I started with a QuickBooks software to get all these numbers that were jumbled into one place where I could start looking at and understanding. In the first couple of years, it was really kind of self-teaching the bare simple bones of what QuickBooks did. Expenses in, income expenses out, income in, and kind of realizing that, but still not knowing a lot of how QuickBooks worked and how to utilize it properly. So I fortunately was able to start working with Erin through a grant doing a business plan. And we created a relationship, and I started talking to her, and she kind of started realizing that you could use some help here. And I'll admit it that, I love farming. I love putting seeds in the ground. The business side was something I really never was fully involved in or knew about at that time. And I'm talking probably 3 years ago now. And so she really started, she's like, let's get your QuickBooks in line. Let's figure out where all these numbers are, make sure they're in the right spots so you can start looking at them and understanding how they're working. And on the other side of things, start saving you time on the business side of things, because it's a whole nother side of the business itself, managing the money, managing the expenses, and tracking all that. So it was really two key things of cleaning up the mess and making it efficient, because I work and do 3 or 4 times the job of, a regular crew. So how can I, cut that down to where I can make my life a little more at ease to be able to mitigate and do all these different things. So.
Awesome. And I love that, because so many of us do not value our time, and that's the one none of us can create any more of.
Right.
So Jessica, how did that transition happen for you? When did you start thinking about your business as a business rather than something that you did just because you loved it?
I still think it's kind of a hybrid between the two. But my husband especially is very business minded. So it's beyond the passion for it. There's the business side of it, and the passion doesn't happen if the business isn't in place.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Harrison, like starting off, like we thought we had it all organized, and then, well, our accountant was like, you could do better. And so I have gotten pretty good at QuickBooks. I call my mom if I have any questions. Actually, she's a CPA, and she's really, really good at QuickBooks. So when I have any questions, like, call her, make this make sense. But managing the cash flow, especially because we have, it sounds just like what Harrison does, there's different times where there's more cash flow and there's less cash flow. And, if there's a couple times a year where we have a much higher cash flow need around harvest and around bottling are probably our biggest expenses. And so managing things and planning for that so that we can continue moving forward, because we have to have those things in order to continue to grow.
Fantastic. So Allison, how did you start working with Jessica? What was one of the first questions that she asked you in the realm of ag finance?
Well, as Jessica mentioned, she and her husband have always been really progressive about managing their business and really planning, and they've always done a great job with that. And one of the things that's always a challenge, especially with smaller wineries, is the capital investment that you need for equipment. And so Jessica first reached out to us to talk a little bit more about some different financing options between loans and leases, and different options that could work well with their business and work well with their tax planning. And Jessica and her husband were really very knowledgeable about what their needs were. And they had done some really strong planning. So that initial conversation went really smoothly. And it went in a place where I think we understood what their vision was, and we understood what their business needs were. And we had a good understanding of what was realistic for them as far as being able to take on additional debt to support the growth of their operation. And I think that conversation, the fact that they had such a good foundation and a good understanding, and that they could present us their vision in such an understandable way in the numbers, I think was really the start of that good relationship, where we started off talking about equipment loans and leases and those options. And then we've expanded our relationship to talk a little bit more about different financing options from there. I don't know if Jessica, you want to add anything a little more to that?
Well, it's always helpful when, like you're saying, like we had kind of a vision, we had an idea, but sometimes having that and then knowing how to make that happen, that's where Allison and her team came in really helpful, because we basically went to them and said, hey, this is what we want to do. How do we get there? And they've made that so easy. They've really helped. For example, we do equipment leases, essentially, particularly on our barrels each year, rather than having that $10,000 to $20,000 outlay right at once, right as we're in the middle of harvest, where we have a significant financial outlay of purchasing grapes and doing all of our harvest and production. We're able to spread that out, and that was a huge cash flow helper, I guess, is the best way to put that. And the ability, so as I'm sure in Harrison's operation, equipment is very important. And we were operating with a smaller realm of equipment, but to increase the quality, to increase the production, and to increase the efficiency, we had been looking at going to some larger equipment. And the farm ag leasing really helped us to do that and not have that huge cash hit right before we needed it.
Fantastic. And it sounds like your relationship blossoms, the two of you, because you have numbers that you can use and work with right away. So you know where you are and you know where you're headed. It's not a guessing game like it is when someone shows up with a shoebox.
Oh, yeah.
So in that regard, Harrison, how much did your growing up in your same town and same farm prepare you for the business that you got yourself into? Right? Did you have that background of, a mom as a CPA preparing you for what you were going to get into, or grandpa as a farmer? And how good a job did they do of preparing you at that?
No, that's the thing. I really grew up with, my father's a small business owner. He knows how to deal and manage his money, but his business is really, really different than how I run my business. So he was that foundation of, here's QuickBooks. This is how I utilize it and work it. But as I started to learn and educate myself, I started to see the separation there of how we are so different as a business and how we take in money, how we manage the money separately. And being a very seasonal business where there's high cash flow and very limited cash flow throughout the season versus his business where it's pretty constant. There's different things to be looking at. So, I had a lot of experience on the agricultural side of how to grow vegetables. I was probably fortunate to have some of the best people to do that for me. I went to 2 years of ag school at UMass Stockbridge, which was another great utilizing tool of learning agriculture. But I never got that business side of agriculture and realizing that the business side of agriculture is different than the rest of the industry. The way we do things, the way we manage money, the way our businesses are run are just plain different than any other industry out there. And every year I pick up a little more and more to realize how unique we are. So, I really started with zero experience with the business side of things. So to be able to be brought into programs and, have an interest of start learning of how my money is being managed, where it's going, where it should be going, and how I should be bringing it in were really like cool, eye-opening things to me that I could see results for the work I was putting in. So yeah, I'm 3 years in with Erin now, I think, and I'm still learning. I'm very, very young, but I'm still learning year after year of how to improve, how to manage better, how to run the business side better. So I'm only 24, so I still have time to learn, I say. But I'm very fortunate to have started now instead of maybe 5 years down the road where I am, because it would have been a crapshoot, if you will. So I'm really in that mode of like learn as much as you can, take in as much as you can, because it's going to benefit you for the future. So
I think that's great advice or a great outlook no matter what your age, because we have lots of people as of late that think agriculture is a pretty cool place to be. So some of them are even coming in as their second career, and everything that you're describing, I think, is a different learning curve and stuff that will benefit us no matter where we are in our journey. And Allison, a lot of what you do is then coaching new farmers, whether they're young farmers or second career farmers, with running the business end of things. So what kind of skills or techniques would you say they need to be well versed in to be successful running a farm business?
Yeah, no, that's really true that we do spend a lot of time just working on some basic education and basic coaching around, especially with beginning farmers, and especially with, like you mentioned, people that are looking at ag as a second career, or as something that they want to expand into, retirement and that kind of thing. And the conversation that we're having right now is really the conversation that we tend to have one-on-one, where we basically describe that it's wonderful to have a passion, but you have to have a viable business to keep the passion going. And so to really understand how to understand your business and how to educate yourself is really the key element, and to make sure that you understand what numbers you're generating and how those numbers tell the story that, Erin, you mentioned earlier, that you're talking about describing the story of your business and describing the story of your passion using your numbers. And that's really what we're trying to focus our coaching and education around, is making sure that there is record keeping that is sufficient, and that there is utilization of planning tools that can really help describe what the future of the vision and future of the passion is. Because, is what Harrison and Jessica have been talking about, that they really did have a vision and really did have a passion, but to be able to implement it and to be able to grow it and to be able to realize what was going on, they had to be able to explain the story adequately to someone else. And to be able to explain that story to someone else, it is helpful to have data, and that data comes with understanding your numbers and understanding your budgeting and understanding your planning.
Very important stuff. And Jessica, did you find that you were learning that along the way? We heard Harrison say, the farming preparation, he didn't have the business education. Do you feel that yours prepared you for what you're doing now, or are you learning as you go as well?
Very much learning as we go. Thankfully, my husband has a head for numbers. He's really, really good at that. He's like a walking calculator. It's crazy. My degree is actually in music. So not so much the business side. I mean, I've been around business sides of things throughout my life, but it's definitely been a learning curve, learning more as we go. I mean, I feel like we had a decent foundation, but if I could redo it, like go back, I would do like 10 times as much preparation and planning and like making sure everything was in place, rather than the occasional catch up that we have to do, especially early on.
Well, there's always more work than there is time. So it sounds like you've got a better handle on it than you're giving yourself credit for. So how do you use these business tools like a cash flow budget or planning then, as you're going through the update for the year with Allison?
Yes, not as strictly as we should. I'm looking at this going, I really should do that all the time. I mean, we have a general idea because through our QuickBooks program and through just kind of the way we operate, we have a general idea, but I do actually need to commit to always putting it on paper like that. It would, I think, make things even smoother.
I heard a great phrase from Elaine Phrase, who is a farm succession planner, and she said, we got to stop shooting on ourselves and just do it. That we all have done, right? And now it's time to start doing them. So speaking of, as we're talking about cash flow budgets and benchmarks for things like margin and numbers, Harrison, we were talking about a new product that you were considering offering in your farm stand, the pasture raised pork. Can you go through and share a little bit of the information that you were gathering and the thought process you were going through about the numbers?
Yeah, so there's a new farm that came into town that grows pasture raised pork and chicken, meat birds. And we've been offering beef at our retail store for a little over a year now, which has gained interest with certain people. We've been looking for pork and other chicken products for the whole year pretty much as well. And when this came as an opportunity, we jumped right on it. So we talked to them. We had a great conversation of the products they had available, when they would be available, and how we could try to work with them and market their business as well as sell these awesome products to our customers. So they're like, okay, we'll get a price sheet together for you and send it your way. So I don't know if people know a lot about pork or pasture raised stuff. I personally am not that versed in it because I grow vegetables, but we got the price sheet from them, and a lot of stuff was anywhere between $9.50 up or downwards per pound of stuff. And they gave us a suggested retail price of just about $1 more for every product. And my first instinct off the bat was like, that's not even worth bringing in because of the profit margin there. If I'm going to bring in, we're not selling quantities and quantities. We might move, at the high end, 20 pieces a week if we're lucky. So to put $20 in my pocket to advertise this, to get it to our stand, get it in a freezer, deal with the expenses of having a freezer there, dealing with the expenses of having someone take the time to market it, really was just, to me, was kind of like, let's cut it there and not try it. But I don't give up like that. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, and we decided to start some communication with the farm that was selling these products, kind of asking, how are they going to be marketing this product in our own town? Are they really going to be offering this product in the same town at the same price? Can we try to increase our profit margin, maybe, by $3 to $4? So we're getting that 30 to 40% profit increase. Will people buy the meat at that price? Which this is a very new thing we're actually doing this week. So we're still kind of figuring that out. Another idea we had was some kind of consignment. If we're bringing in a certain amount of products and trying to advertise their business, if they'd be willing to buy it, kind of give it to us as we sell, or we can pay them as we sell. If they're not willing to lower their price, or we can't get that profit margin, and try to make it a little more worthwhile. So we're kind of in that planning stage of like, is it worth pursuing? Should we kind of just wash our hands with it now? Those kind of things we're kind of looking at. So it's a lot of back and forth and really looking at the numbers. And, if we were selling 1,000 pieces a day, that's $1,000 in my pocket just to buy a product and sell it. But the volumes that we move aren't as large as maybe big retail grocery stores and stuff. So kind of have to look at our time efficiency. Opportunity cost is a new word I've been throwing around a lot, which is something I might bring up again of like, is it worth it to do? Because we're doing so many other things. We're advertising so many other products. So is it worth sticking this one product in here to make a few customers happy and still be able to turn a profit or not?
And what I love about this is a couple of different things. First, you heard Harrison explain the practical way of looking at that 5-line income statement, right? The cost of the product of the pork is one thing. Then what does he need that margin for, right? The transportation of, how he's going to be handling it, keeping it cold, keeping it refrigerated or frozen, whatever that path is, right? Marketing it. Like once you outlay your marketing dollars, you're not going to use more of them just because that one product sold, right? So that's really an overhead expense. So he's separating those things in his head and explaining them to us how he actually uses that philosophy in considering whether or not this product is useful for his business. And also the focus, right? I know a lot of farmers that would say, oh, pork, we got to grow it ourselves. And being able to focus on what I'm good at, and whether that's plants or animals, right, is a very good boundary to set so that you can do what you are good at and let someone else do what they're good at so that you can both win. So good for you on that. I love hearing those things. And Jessica, do you have an example that you could share with us where you consider the numbers as you're pricing maybe a new variety, or if they need to be in those barrels that you were describing? Because $10,000 to $20,000 a year of barrels is not chump change.
No, and that's slightly more affordable barrels. That's not all like French oak, which are
Right.
those run upwards of 1,000 or more a piece. Well, not like, I guess not individually, like for specific products, but just our wine in general. I mean, we're taking into consideration the growing costs, the purchase price if they're not our estate grapes,
Mhm.
any labor we have to hire. I mean, we're thankful our team really helps out. So we have a lot of movement there as far as harvesting goes. It's actually a lot of fun. But harvesting, if it's a white wine or a rosé, we have to take into consideration the chilling costs. Those go into giant stainless steel tanks. And then our chiller, because you have to cold ferment those, and then you have to also cold stabilize those. And the chiller is pretty expensive to run. Thankfully, we do have solar, which helps. And we've, balanced like the offset of adding more solar to cover when the chiller is on versus paying the excess electrical. And then we get into, or the barrel costs, if they're not whites or rosés, they do go into barrel. And then we also have to factor in our glass, our corks, our labels, our capsules, and the bottling truck, which we just started using, which has been a huge time savings for us. So it's worth every penny, and it doesn't add a huge cost to each bottle. So it's kind of overall in general, like when we go to, when we price a single bottle of wine, we take all of that into consideration. But it's not like evaluating a new product like Harrison is dealing with right now.
And I think it shows another way to apply that, though, because you're making a batch, and everything that I've understood about winemaking is no one knows exactly where the angel's share goes. So the amount you put into the barrels is not the amount that you bottle, and you've got to be able to account for that somewhere and still make a profit, even if that's disappeared. So you're applying it on a larger scale to take advantage of the averages. That's fantastic. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about a mentor you might have had. You mentioned your mom's a CPA, and some kids either love what their parents are doing or they want nothing to do with it. And my parents are teachers and farmers, and I never thought I would be a teacher, but here I am. This is my job and I love it. And how did you experience that? And was your mom your mentor or was somebody else?
I mean, definitely my whole life. My mother's still one of my best mentors. In terms of the winery business, and the farming operation here, we've had a lot of different mentors. We've been very fortunate that all of the other owners and just people in the industry in our area are very giving. We had friends who we would call up, be like, hey, I'm not sure about this, or I'm doing this. What do I need to do next? So we got a lot of hands-on experience, which is definitely the way that both my husband and I are best at learning. You can teach it to us on paper, but until we actually get our hands dirty with it, it doesn't stick as well. But yeah, a lot of different people in the area. We have a couple of winemakers in particular who've been very influential. But yeah, definitely parents as well, just in the general life side of things, and some of the business side as well.
Oh, fantastic. And a couple of questions coming in from the audience. Can you tell us how much of your sales are retail, direct to the consumer, versus wholesale or to another institution or an intermediary?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very unique. Since we're a boutique winery, we do have a fairly small production. We're almost exclusively direct to consumer out of our tasting room. It wasn't even till earlier this year when we had to shut the tasting room that we even did online sales, just because of the legalities and all the stuff that goes into wine licensing and selling. It gets a little complicated. So it just wasn't something we had tackled because we always move the product quickly enough through the tasting room. So right now I'd say we're probably 95% direct to consumer. We do have a couple of wholesale accounts. We're very selective on where our product goes. We want it to reflect well on our brand, and on the winery itself. So we partner very closely with a couple of spots. There's a restaurant in town, a local natural grocery store. And then there's two other restaurants that carry a few things as well.
Great. Sound like good partners. And you do the same, Harrison, right? So you have an online store, and tell us how that's changed this year, but then also how much are you doing retail versus working on the wholesale side of things as you described with your spinach?
Yeah, so we started as a retail business with a small farm stand, like I talked about, and that's really been the focus of Bardwell Farms since we started. so year after year, we've kind of expanded our retail side of things and how we work direct with the consumer. One of my big personal things I like to deal with is educating people how their food is grown, you know, the process of it and how we get it to their plate every day. And I really don't think I can do that if I am just strictly wholesale. And we also love the customer interaction with the local communities. We also have a CSA, farm share program, which brings in, we're still young in that, but we're about 80 to 100 people, hopefully for this next season. So our business is probably, I'm going to say between 85, 90% direct to consumer. A lot of the products we're doing are being harvested that day or the day before, and they're going out front to our retail farm store for people to purchase. Due to COVID and everything, we've always been kind of more, I'd say, ahead of the times, if you will, wanting to try new things. So a website was really something I was interested many years ago. And I think we're in our 4th or 5th year of having a very nice kept up website from my office manager who deals with that. But we had all these other products that we were trying to advertise and sell that we really couldn't stick out on the small farm stand that I had. And if I'm able, I'll somehow get a picture of what that looked like. But it's a lot smaller than the tent you saw in my slideshow. And we're also offering other unstable products to display outside. So we were trying to figure out a way of how we could advertise and sell these products. So we kind of took and bit the bullet and decided to invest in an online farm store in addition with our website to see if that would track interest. And for the first year, it really wasn't that popular because what I've come to realize is people like to touch the products they want to buy. They like to see them. They like to be involved with the communication with our staff and kind of getting the story. And you don't get as much of that on the online store. But due to COVID and with all the crazy things going on, we already had this in place. So this early spring, we were able to incorporate our online store and really be able to streamline, advertise, promote, and sell the products that we had available. And we kind of became a hub in our town here of having local, fresh products available to offer to our customers. So it was really, it was something we invested in before, which really wasn't creating traction. And we were probably at the beginning or so of last year, we were going to start thinking of like, is this worth it? And because of COVID, it kind of changed everything around of like, okay, we're getting sales through our online store daily now versus maybe 1 or 2 a month. So seeing that traction change was really interesting. And now that it's kind of incorporated into our daily systems and routines, it kind of flows and it works well. Looking at the money side of it is kind of still something we got to look at of, okay, how much are we actually paying in labor and time to do this? Can we perfect it and make it more streamlined? And one way we did that is this winter is the first year we're open year round. And that is kind of how, with our online store, is how we're advertising and promoting that side of our business. So we kind of structured things of we're only going to be open 3 days a week versus 7 to dedicate more time to different things throughout the winter, but also be able to utilize this online store to be able to sell and market our products. And then pedaling back on the other side is we do small wholesale with our business, and that's to kind of sell and get rid of the excess products that we have available from the farm stand and cater them to restaurants, small grocery stores, other distributors in the area to kind of, sell and get rid of as much as we're growing, because we're growing such a diverse array of things, and you can only grow things at a certain size to make it sustainable. So trying to intertwine all that together and make it work. So we're still learning year after year and perfecting it. So
well, it sounds like you both are in a place where there are a lot of people. And one of the questions from the audience was, how have you dealt with urban sprawl? So on one hand, you've got customers, but then you also have the challenges that come along with people and building and all that. So let's hear first from Jessica. How have you and your farm dealt with that?
So what's actually interesting is we actually are in a small town. We're in the eastern end of or the East County, San Diego. So we're about 45 minutes from downtown, but the town of Ramona actually is pretty small. So we don't have as much impact from that as I think a lot of other places would. If anything from that in other areas, we're just seeing more customers come through.
Mhm.
But it doesn't directly impact the farming side of our business, or really, I mean, other than positive impact for the winery.
Okay. And Harrison?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question one more time?
Sure. The submitted by the audience wanted to know, how have you dealt with urban sprawl? What are the impacts of all the population and land use on your farming operation?
Yeah, so definitely with COVID and everything going on, it definitely drew a lot of more local community to our farm stand, and the people in the surrounding area were kind of starting to realize that local and fresh grown produce is more beneficial than going to the grocery store. So definitely seeing traction coming in from that with our local community. This was one of the first years we didn't see a lot of outside business coming in from other states and everything, just due to COVID, which was kind of a difference, which kind of decreased our amount of sales throughout certain parts of the season. And then on the other side, was the question more of how it intertwined with my business and my employees?
Yeah, how does urban sprawl impacted you over the generations? So how easy is it to find land compared to when your grandfather was running his business? And maybe tell the audience too what your dad's business is, because he's not a farmer.
Right.
So it's not, you're in the generation line, but it's not been continuous. You picked up something and started it all over again.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate with having, like, the farm that I am currently farming has been in production technically for hundreds of years. It essentially skipped a beat because when my father was 16, my grandfather, who was really one who mentored me through a lot of the agricultural side of things, said, "There's no money in farming, so kind of look at a different path." And my father kind of shrugged it off for a couple of years and tried his own path in agriculture, and started a nursery, which then he turned around and deemed wasn't profitable enough. So he turned around, and now my father is a finished carpenter. But with that said, all the land that I have available, all the infrastructure, the limited equipment I started was at my hands when I was ready to take it on. Which, being a young generation farmer and not having anything to start with, I was leaps ahead of other people. With that said, the business structure that my grandfather was doing back in the 80s and 90s is completely different than what I am doing now. So granted, I had the land available to me. I have over 30 acres of tillable acreage that I have at my footsteps whenever I want to expand. Is amazing. Lots of people have a very hard time finding land, especially in this area of the U.S. It's just taken up by other farms, or is very, very expensive for new beginning farmers to purchase. The other side of the infrastructure that's currently on the farm is there's lots of barns and buildings that I've slowly worked into incorporating to utilize for my own business, which my father kind of sits and shakes his head because he owns them. That's kind of part of his business. But so I'm in that middle ground of I have enough and had enough to get off the ground, but I'm at that point where I'm so different than what my grandfather was doing, is that the business started with not the essentials to be a diversified vegetable farm. So over the years, we're slowly working on improving infrastructure to deal with packaging, holding, storage of produce, growing different crops. This past year was actually the first year I had a greenhouse to grow vegetable starts in, which is essential for the business and the climate that I'm growing in currently. And we're still down the road looking for more equipment and machinery to be able to expand and get there. So it's one side I was very lucky. The other side, we're still working a lot to get to where we want to be. So hope that better answers.
Yeah, great job. So Gary has texted me the poll answers, and 39% of you gave 5 stars to benchmark information is super important to help a new farmer get started. 32% gave 4 stars, 21% 3 stars, 7% 2 stars, and nobody thought that it was only a 1-star thing. So we all think it's important. So Allison, my next question for you is, what do you think one of the biggest challenges in getting started with the numbers are for a beginning farmer? And what do we do about that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think that it kind of comes from a couple of different sides. I think that one of the challenges is just really finding a system that is understandable and that you'll continue. So whether that's utilizing QuickBooks, we've heard that that's a great tool that has been really helpful, but there's also a learning curve for that. So making sure that a beginning farmer really is investing the time required to understand the tools is a little bit of a challenge, and that's something that I think that we're working to continue educating the importance of that on. So whether it's QuickBooks or whether it's a different accounting software package, or whether like you said at the start that there's some even Excel worksheets that are really helpful, just tools to help people get started. I think that's a big place of it, is just finding the place to start and really developing your own internal system where you can stay organized that doesn't involve a shoebox. That really, so I think that's one place. Yeah, and then the second place is really, the second piece of advice is really what both Jessica and Harrison have mentioned, is assembling their team and assembling the people that can really support them, and the people that, so whether that's your loan officer or your CPA, or whether it's a family member or a business partner, someone that can really help provide some of that educational support, and someone that can really take ownership of the numbers and take ownership of the system, and make sure that it's not being utilized in a way where it's only halfway being utilized, so the final numbers aren't as helpful, because you really do have to commit to the system to make sure that you can utilize those numbers, and that they really do tell the story, and that they really are helpful in making future decisions and making planning decisions.
Oh, fantastic. And we're seeing that right now, as some of the online tools allow you to import bank transactions to help with, credit card recording, and those kinds of things can really save you time if you're willing to use that technology. So I think that's a great tip. Use it all the way, make that commitment so that you have a tool that'll be there for you to give you what you need it to. So along those lines, with things changing and needing to keep up with it and have the expertise that goes along with it, the audience question that came up next, and we'll start with you, Jessica, is what was your experience with the Paycheck Protection Program and the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, CFAP?
So we looked very closely at the Payroll Protection Program, and was it the PPE was the other one? There was another.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, because we ended up doing a small business loan, like through the SBA, like the disaster, but it wasn't specifically the payroll protection program, because the majority of our expenses are not payroll. My payroll expenses are when in the tasting room on the weekends when we have team in. So it's not like 5 days a week. So that it didn't make sense for us there to go with that because that limited what we could use the funds for. So we did take advantage of what they offered, but we did it through the other program. It took a while to get in place, but it really has helped this year, especially with being closed for so long.
A whole new operating environment. How about you, Harrison? Have you taken advantage of either of those programs? And what was your experience there?
Yeah, so we utilize the PPP program, where on the other side, my business is solely run by employees. Payroll is a big part of my expense every year, where we're working with people 7 days a week through the heat of our season, anywhere from, May, June to November. So we have people on staff 7 days a week. So being able to utilize the PPP program early in the season and be able to offset some of those payroll costs that, one, were new this year because we expanded our employee numbers, doubled this year with our farm store. So being able to have that little cushion of insurance, I should say, of a little extra money to be able to pay for that up front and kind of get into the rhythm of how drastically that payroll was going to change week to week. Having that available to use was really gratifying. The process of applying for that, a lot of documents that I personally wasn't versed in and didn't really know where to find. So Erin was very helpful to come in and say, hey, you need this, you can find it here. Let me know if you need help. And I love kind of working with her on that aspect. If she doesn't just like hand it to me, here you go, this is what you need. She says, this is what you need to find. This is what it looks like. These are the numbers that are going to help you utilize what you're looking for. See if you can find it in your files, in your paperwork, and yada, yada. So it was a group effort of working and getting the application filled out. But in the end, we got it and we got approved, and it definitely helped with the startup of payroll for our 2020 season.
And there were some challenges in even figuring all of that out, because this is the first program, to my knowledge, that SBA has ever been able to work with agriculture. Usually it's USDA programs. So just the learning curve associated with ag payroll is on different forms that most of the rest of the world doesn't see. So you're not necessarily going to come up with a 941 because you file a 943 and it's the annual equivalent. And yes, it's totally legit. You've just never seen it before because you've never worked through these programs. So luckily we've had some good partners in being able to make this happen for all the businesses. And as Jessica said, when it wasn't possible for us to be open in a retail environment because of the COVID restrictions, that could make a big difference for keeping on going. And then, as you said, both of you, the online sales. So let me ask you this, as far as farm business in general, never mind 2020, right, which has been different than anyone expected. What do you wish you'd known when you started your farm business about running your farm business? I'll start with you, Jessica.
It's a question I've been thinking about a lot lately. So two things. So the first, as organized as you think you are, you're not. And so like, take the extra time, be even more organized before you dive into it. Like if you can, have all the organizational infrastructure in place, especially when it comes to like QuickBooks and all of those things. Spend more time there than you think you need to, because it will save you headaches later on. And then something that, I don't know, I don't think we knew this when we started, but something that we found to be very helpful is when you're looking at equipment and like capacity, where you are able, go one size up of what you think you need so that next year you don't have to redo the whole thing and buy again. It'll save you a lot of time. It'll save you a lot of money. That's fortunately what we were able to do. We got a whole new processing setup last year, actually. So our crusher destemmer, our bin dumper was here. We got a new press, a new elevator with a dump at the bottom, and the new pump. It makes our process so much faster, so much easier. So much more efficient, and we get a higher yield off of our grapes. So it's essentially already paid for itself in the higher volume, the quality. But we did size it up. Like, we're like, hey, this is what we think we need. Can we go one size up to give us the room to grow? And I don't know that very initially we knew to do that, but we've learned over the years that if we're able to make that happen and still have that be viable, that's really important, because it'll save you a lot of time and money later.
And what's the challenge, Allison, in financing that, or working with supporting a business that's trying to invest ahead of their growth curve, but they're farmers, they're going to grow. That's what they do. What are the challenges from your side in helping someone make that investment a little bit ahead of the curve?
Well, I think that it's a real question of cash flow challenge, and are they able to maintain, if they are sizing up equipment, are they able to take on the repayment requirements in their cash flow with that? So I think that that's a little bit of a challenge, to just make sure that their planning is adequate to cover that. And then there may need to be some talks of different loan structures, or talks of different, to make sure that that planning doesn't end up constricting the farm by constricting the cash flow.
Good point. Because when you're saying yes to one thing, you're effectively saying no to something else. And golly, there's never as much money or time as there are projects.
Well, and that's the fine balance of, if you can, if it's feasible to like, because like for us, some of the equipment between two different kinds wasn't a huge difference between the two. Like, we're talking maybe a few $1,000s, but in some things that's a very big difference. But rather than, spending 20,000 now versus 30,000 again in a year or two. But yeah, definitely a balance there, and making sure it's something you can do. And that's where Allison and her team come in really helpful. Like, yeah, this is viable, this is workable, or no, we probably need to rethink that.
And what does that vote of confidence or those words of wisdom do for you as you're making those decisions?
It reinforces what we think we know, because sometimes you need that outside perspective to look at it even more objectively and say, yeah, with what you've been doing, with how things are going, with your projections, this makes sense. Or in another case, maybe let's revisit this. But having that outside professional perspective has been very helpful.
Awesome. And again, using benchmarks. Maybe it's not an industry one per se, and that it's someone else's experience with other businesses that are similar or have been through growth periods, but also what has your business historically been able to handle is another form of a benchmark that we use quite often. So Harrison, back to you. What do you wish you'd known when you started your farm business that you know now? What would you put on that list?
Probably definitely piggyback some of the things Jessica said, but the financial side of really understanding what those numbers mean, how to work with them, how to utilize a software like QuickBooks and really be able to take those numbers and put them into a report and read them, understand what they mean, are really things that I didn't know starting off the bat. Like I said, if I had, it would probably put me maybe a couple of years ahead of where I was. But those are big things, is understanding the numbers, understanding what overhead means versus cost of production or cost of goods. Those were two things I didn't know really what they meant when I started 4 or 5 years ago. And really being able to break up those and looking at the different numbers, every month on QuickBooks of like, this is overhead, seeing the cost reduction with the payroll definitely increasing this year versus last year. And understanding, seeing those numbers now versus, 5 years ago was like, I don't know, we're spending more money, but I didn't know why. And this year, in the past year, I've been able to really look and say, okay, we're spending more here, but we're bringing in more here, and being able to look at those numbers and work. The other side of things of like, I always ask myself, I wish I knew where my business is going to be in 10, 15 years, because I have no clue, because we're constantly growing and trying different things. But, like Jessica said, oversize anything that you're going to think you're going to need. And currently right now, I'm in the process of designing a wash and pack house with coolers to eventually, hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, build and have on my farm to make my business more efficient, be able to move more product. But really trying to plan and project of where you think you want to be maybe 10 years down the road, and maybe even plan for a little bigger than that. Because what I've learned is not having the right equipment, not having the right spaces, really just slows and bogs you down as a business, financially and efficiently. So being able to take that initial investment, even though it might hurt, your profit margin might be a lot smaller, but knowing that you invested in something that's going to make you more money and save you more time, 5, 10, 20 years down the road is worth looking at to start versus, maybe, oh, I can buy a greenhouse for half the size because it'll get me by for the next couple of years versus let's buy a greenhouse triple the size that I can grow into. And what I've learned is having more space than you're ever going to need, if you can afford to do that investment, is do it, because I guarantee you will fill that crevice in that building with something at some point. So and just really having an overlook of where it would be. My business is really evolving every year, but one thing I've always learned is grow slowly. And I know I've said I've been growing really fast the past couple of years, which we have, but we're going to tone down and look at the numbers, look of what we've done and how we've gotten there and if it's working. But the biggest thing I was told when I started 7 years ago is grow slowly. So don't take a $500,000 loan out the first year and hope you're going to make it. It's like grow slowly with what you need, figure out what you need, and then plan for the future once you kind of have that better vision. So.
Awesome. And along those lines, you talk a lot about investing in the business. What are you doing to invest in yourself? How do you make sure that you get paid out of your business? And I'll put that question to both of you. And Harrison, you can go first this time.
Yeah. So, being a young business, I really am slowly working on getting there because I haven't gotten there yet. And it's something that Erin and I talk a lot about of like, have you paid yourself yet? And the answer is no, because I've been focusing a lot of the income towards improvements of the business itself. But having that and understanding that in the back of my mind is, oh, you shouldn't be working for nothing. You put 80 to 100 hours a week in and you're not paying yourself. Well, our expenses are elsewhere at this point, and figuring and looking at the numbers, budgeting, maybe different marketing schemes of how to get there is something that I am working on. And I'm constantly thinking of, how can we change this to put a little more in maybe my pocket, or, where do we need to be where I can be able to be putting money into my pocket versus, into the pockets of my employees as much versus myself. So it's really, I'm not there yet, but it's something that's really on the back of my mind of, I need to be there so I can financially sustain my own personal life, as well as have enough income to sustain the business. So something that's still in the works, I would say.
Good. Part of a lifelong business evolution, right? How about you, Jessica?
Very much the same boat as Harrison. We only in the last year or two we started paying me when I'm working behind the counter. So when I'm working with our customers in the tasting room, we do not pay me for everything else they do. Marketing, production, like everything in the back. We're just not there yet. We keep reinvesting into ourselves to make it better, to make it more efficient. So it's something we're working on. We would like to ultimately pay me for what I do. We're just not there yet. Fortunately, my husband has a full-time regular job that makes it so that's not as big of a stressor as you might think. But still, it'd be nice to actually get a paycheck for all the hours that I work.
And you both deserve it. One of the things that I really like to have a discussion about, and my job is just to ask hard questions, is how do you make sure that the business is sustainable? And who would do as much work as you do with as much expertise as you bring to it for the amount of pay that you get? And most of us in the agriculture world would say, well, nobody. So as a boss, you're making out really well on this employee that's you. So if you can put that into your plan for 2021, it can make a big difference towards actually making it happen, right? You figure out how to find the budget for that new piece of equipment. Make sure you're prioritizing yourself too, so that you can come back next year and do this all over again. And I have no doubt, hearing all of the different practices that you both put into place, that you will be able to do that. So don't think it's selfish or greedy. It's important for the sustainability of your business and enjoying it going forward. And whenever I'm speaking to a farm group, what do we say about the hours on a farm? right? They're long hours. And what do we say
Never
about the,
ending.
it's hard work,
Hard work.
right? None of us are afraid of that. It's when the pay stinks that we wonder why young people don't want to come back into agriculture, but we can do something about that. And that brings in one of our next audience questions. Jessica, we're curious about, will you pursue or continue online sales in a post-COVID environment?
We will. Now that we've started it, it's not going anywhere. A lot of our sales are still direct to consumer, and that a lot of them are for pickups. And I don't know who watching is familiar with all of the alcohol regulations when it comes to shipping. They get a little complicated, so we can't ship everywhere. But we're trying to streamline that even more. And we've got a couple of tools. We actually just transitioned to a new point of sale system, which it has a really good online presence. And then we work with also Vino Shipper, which is through the Craft Wine Association that we're connected with them, that they hold the licensing in some of the different states that we can't ship directly to. But yeah, we'll definitely keep our online presence and hopefully promote it and grow it even more. It definitely still is not the majority of our business, but it definitely helped when we had to be shut down and we're only available for pickup sales.
And how about you, Harrison? Do you think the online farm store is something that you'll continue in the future, even with no COVID?
Yeah, we've put it in place. We've taken the time to really perfect it and see the best way to utilize it. And especially in our current system where, we're not a retail business open in the winter months, where we are trying to bring in sales during the winter months. This is really our best avenue right now to advertise and promote and display the products that we have available. And, right now we are selling fresh greens out of our winter high tunnels to people buying off our online farm store daily. So, yes, I think we'll definitely keep it in place. It might be more of a seasonal thing that we kind of cater to in the future, seeing that our retail business in front of the house really, we know does a bulk of our business, versus the winter months where we can't offer that as much. So maybe transitioning to the online system to be able to continue that path. So it's definitely brought in, I wouldn't say crazy amounts of business, but people are slowly picking up on what we're doing with it and how it's working. And I think it's really maybe based off your customer base too. We have a lot of older population in our area that might not have a computer or know how to use, the online systems. So as we see a younger population move in, we only see it gaining more and more traction. So.
All right, super convenient to be able to shop from my couch.
Right.
Allison, let's go back to you about the importance of farm record keeping, and what do you see as the biggest motivator in a new farmer or a farm business that keeps them going in it and coming back to learning more about their numbers? What's that spark that really makes a difference?
Well, I think that it's experience, that when they're trying to make a major purchase, or they're trying to do an investment, or they're trying to answer some questions, people start to recognize that having a good record keeping system and having an accurate record keeping system is really the only way that they're going to be able to answer the questions that they want to answer. And that when they're planning, and especially, both Jessica and Harrison touched on this, that these capital investments are huge. And so if you're going to be, spending tens of thousands of dollars on new equipment, or if you're trying to expand and find additional space, you really do need to have that support and that understanding that this is going to support your business going forward and is going to help you generate new sales. And I think that people start to recognize that the only way they can really make those decisions is by understanding their own business and understanding their own records. And so I think that's really the motivator, is that as people are experienced in their business and they start trying to make plans, they really recognize, and I think that's something that keeps people making the investment into understanding different systems and understanding different programs, and really developing what Jessica mentioned, that organizational infrastructure, is that it becomes critical.
Yeah, and we always are used to looking at last year as, okay, how do we do this? That tells us a story. But then if we make a plan for a different next year, how do those two compare? And are they going to improve in the way that we need them to in order to make those investments? And the answer is absolutely it can. Let's use the tools that we've got to be able to do that. And one of those tools is knowing what your labor does. And one of the audience questions was, how do you track your labor and do you allocate it to different functions within your business? Jessica, let's have you start with that one.
So we're unique in the sense that we do most of the labor ourselves. Like occasionally we'll bring someone in to help with just some like you know, the day-to-day stuff, but like I prune our entire vineyard by hand myself. Like we put up the nets, like our team will sometimes come in and they've really, especially this year, jumped into like the learning and wanting to do it. So a lot of times they'll just come up for an afternoon, hang out with us, and, you know, we make dinner at the end of the day. So I think the biggest labor allocation issue for me is just time management and budgeting. Okay, well, I need to do this stuff on the back end, but I also need to be in the vineyard working on this. We definitely don't have the same labor demands and needs that I know Harrison does with his operation. So.
Harrison, are you able to track who is in the field versus who is in the store? And how do you use that information, or how will you use that information?
Yeah, so we started a new payroll system this year, which really helps deal with all of our employees and the entering of payroll and the hours. Personally, I know exactly who's in the field and who's on my in my farm store, but my QuickBooks, we're slowly transitioning on how to break those apart to be able to really see those numbers. So we're not quite there yet. There are definitely ways and avenues to incorporate that into QuickBooks really easily. It's just something we didn't have quite time to get to this year. So if it's working this winter on taking those numbers that are already in QuickBooks and moving them around is definitely an avenue that I'm probably going to look at and perfecting that for the next season, so we can largely labor, like I said, it is the bulk of my business. It is the biggest expense of my business, and without a doubt, it probably always will be. So it's really a main focus that we have to kind of continually keep looking at looking at the areas of where we're spending the money on the payroll and making sure it's most efficient. And a good example is this year we did our farm store manned for the first time, and really starting it, not having a good clue of, okay, how many people are we actually going to need? When are we going to need them? And that kind of thing. And this year, now going through a full season and seeing that drastic increase in the payroll just on that side, which we knew would come, but looking at it now saying, can we perfect and change and alter the hours people were working? Kind of thinking of, should we close one day out of the week on a slow day where we're paying maybe 3 people to man a stand where we're not bringing in enough income to even pay them? So looking at those numbers after kind of running through a season, being able to take them and utilize them and really make changes for the next year is what we're hoping to do this winter. So.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. I was reading or listening to a podcast that was talking about, I don't fail, I gather information, right?
Yeah. Oh, you have to. Yeah.
And how am I going to use that going forward? And there is an unpredictability, certainly, of when customers are going to come in both Jessica's tasting room and your farm stand. And, there's a safety element of, do you really want someone working by themselves? But there's also hey, there is some synergy with working with someone because you get more done when there's a team as well. So all big challenges to put together. Jessica mentioned a couple of online tools that she's using, a point of sale system, also for shipping some wine. One of the audience questions that came in was, what other tools are you using as it comes with running your business? So is it staff training? Is it point of sale? How do you manage your planting dates or your harvesting or those kinds of things? What tools are you both using? And Jessica, well, let's start with you.
Our biggest tool is honestly our point of sale system, which handles everything. We actually reopening with our COVID restrictions this year, we've switched to a reservation system for the tasting room,
Mhm.
which our team actually loves. It makes planning, it makes scheduling a lot easier. Because same thing, you know, like Harrison was talking about in the retail front. I mean, sometimes you have people standing around, and then there's other times where you need like 5 people as opposed to 1 or 2. So that's definitely helped there. It also manages our wine club, which is the whole reason we switched to it. We were at the point where I was still running everything manually through spreadsheets and documents. And, you know, if you interrupted me while I was working on club, I'd have to start all over, or I would, you know, miss things. So it does that. Honestly, for scheduling stuff for our team schedule, we use a Google Calendar. For all of our production records, I've developed a couple of different Excel spreadsheets that like track our production and fermentations and everything. There are systems out there that are meant to do that for you, but we're not quite big enough for the investment to make sense for me to use one of those. So I still do this somewhat manually. And I think our other biggest tools, honestly, for our team at this point are our social media accounts. And of course, QuickBooks I use on the back end, but I think those are the bulk of the tools that we use.
I'm curious, what's your point of sale system?
We use Zoodle. It's out of Temecula, actually. It was developed for Southern California wineries. So earlier during quarantine, I was getting ready for our club run in July, and I was like, it's to the point where a club management system would be really nice, but I don't quite have to bite the bullet there. Once I started investigating it, it really became clear that it was part of the point of sale system. So I did demos on probably 15 different systems and solutions, and they all have their strengths, they all had their weaknesses. And I took notes and I did spreadsheets of side-by-side comparisons on our needs versus what they provided and what they didn't provide. And then the top 2 front runners, we did a live demo with our team to get their input, because, you know, like I said during my intro, like they're some of our best friends and they really are invested in our business. And they're the ones using it on a day-to-day basis alongside me. So getting their input was really important. But yeah, we've been really happy with the tool, and they're very responsive to requests. They like that we have a technical background because we can make requests and like suggestions on how to make it better. So it's been a really good relationship.
Oh, fantastic. So it sounds like you're really using it and you're really glad you did it.
Yes.
Thinking back, was it the time or the money investment that was the most daunting about making a leap to a system like this?
Time mostly. I mean, some of them were, so some of the models you like pay for, like there's a monthly fee, but then other ones take a commission on top of your sales. Like you pay, you know, however much a month, but then they get like 1, 2, 3% of your sales. And I always have a very hard time with that part of things. And thankfully, the option we went with Zoodle, they have a monthly fee, but they don't do a commission, which was a big plus in their favor as a business person. But the time it takes to switch point of sale systems, I think this is the 3rd one we've used. Just as we've grown, we've had to like look at new things and switch. And since we finally were to the point where having a winery specific software, not just like a restaurant software, was really important. But it took me many, many hours to get everything switched over and set up and dialed in. And I mean, and that's just, it doesn't matter what system you're on. It takes some time to get it set up for your business.
And Harrison, what tools are you using? Because you have a point of sale system as well, and that feeds your online store. Tell us more about what you've found helpful in running the business.
Yeah, so we're utilizing many different software platforms to make Bardwell Farm what it is. And before I jump into it, what we kind of wanted to try to pave a path is using multiple different systems that can work together to make what we do more efficient. So to start at the top is we use QuickBooks to manage all the finances, money in, money out of, you know, the endpoint of the point of sales or wholesale, and expenses going out, which is wonderful. I highly recommend that. For our point of sale system, we use Square. And then in conjunction with that, we use Weebly, which deals with our website / online store. And Square and Weebly now are kind of integrated. They've one of the other bought each other out. So they're slowly working to kind of integrate things together. But with Jessica said, and I don't do it personally, but my office manager deals with all my social media. We're using Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, you name it, we're on it, just to kind of advertise ourselves and promote what we're doing. But there's lots and lots of time and energy put into creating these point of sale systems to make them efficient for use. So there's a lot of back of the house stuff you got to think about going into it. If you're only dealing with 5 products, then it's probably going to be a cakewalk. But with us, where we're dealing with over 200 products at a given time, it's a lot of entering and re-entering and managing and watching things to make sure that they're all up to snuff. We deal with glitches on our online store here and there. So it's really having someone to be able to watch and manage it kind of daily is important if you want to keep up that look and that efficiency. But where I'm getting at is someone comes in and they buy something from either our online store, or if we have the stand open, that goes into our Square system. And what that does is it transitions to a report at the end of the day where we can easily take that and integrate it into QuickBooks, which Erin helped me set up a daily sales report for what the farm stand was doing every day. And it's split up between category. You could split it up between items if you wanted. We created a generic thing between produce, fruit, value addeds, gift and craft, decorative products, and so on. So that way all these sales coming in from all these different items is being tracked into specific categories where we can see an overview on the profit and loss sheet of, wow, we made $180,000 in produce off the farm stand alone this year. And being able to see those numbers is pretty cool. So that's on our sales side of things. For all my production, I use simple Excel spreadsheets. I've kind of adapted and changed the way that I do them. And it's really split up between the dates, the crops, the timings, that kind of stuff. But without utilizing those, I'd be completely lost in the middle of July trying to plant sweet corn. So being able to have something built, even though I'm sure there's better systems out there, but it's investing if you want to invest or not, or just take a little time and make something that works. And the last thing quick is that we use this thing called To Do, which helps kind of track and talk about the different things between our employees, between things coming in, things being received, and tasks that have to get done. So lots of different tools to help.
Fantastic. I mean, it helps make life better in terms of the amount of work, the efficiency of that, so you can get some of that time back, and also communicate, which I think is one of those underestimated things that we don't even always think about. But there's a lot of people on your team, and sharing that information is super important to having everything run smoothly. So thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Great information. And I love that we're giving real life examples of how you're using your numbers and the financials in your business as tools to make them run that much better. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Gary for our wrap up.
Well, thanks, Erin. Hey, that was great information. You know, for those in the audience who are beginning farmers, I think they want to be like Harrison and Jessica. And for those in the audience who train beginning farmers, I think they want to be like Allison and Erin. This was just great. And I asked all of you as panelists to use that link that we sent you earlier in the chat box for you panelists to go into the networking lounge in just a moment. And for those of you that are on the SMUGO Event Hub website, just below the questions, if you scroll down, there's a button that says Networking Lounge. That'll get you into the Networking Lounge. We hope to see you there. You can click on any table, double click on any table, and that will sit you down at that table, and you will have your own Zoom meeting with other people. Our next session, session 5, on supporting generational transfers is going to start at noon Central Time in about 15 minutes. So we look forward to seeing you in the Networking Lounge, and then in 15 minutes for session 5.